Folks, Manish Ghosh, I'm the head of engineering for financial services industry specialized practice in AWS ProServe. Today, I'm going to talk about migrating your Swift environment to AWS. So I assume we all know what Swift is. As Cheng was saying, it's a payment messaging platform for financial services. It is the backbone of all the messaging that happens, interbank messaging. Traditionally, customers have been using or running their Swift environment on-prem, right? But now with AWS platform, uh, uh, obviously being very popular, customers are also thinking about migrating their Swift environment to AWS, essentially to realize the power of AWS. So, what are the typical challenges customers face when they think about migrating their Swift environment to AWS? Let's start with the first one. The migration challenge itself, right? How do you migrate? How can I migrate from my on-prem Swift environment to AWS? As we know, Swift environment requires an on-prem HSM, a hardware security module for encryption, and it requires a VPN box, a physical hardware VPN box, right? How do I migrate my Swift environment with this kind of a requirement? Uh, Next is, how do I maintain my Swift environment on AWS? Uh, Third point, which is actually a very important point, is all Swift customers have to certify on an yearly basis. They have to audit their Swift environment, right? Now, when I migrate to AWS, right, how do I audit my Swift environment? Additional maintenance question, how do I maintain resiliency on AWS? How do I integrate that Swift environment with my DevSecOps pipelines? What about my performance? These are very crucial questions which every customer asks when they think about migrating their Swift environment to AWS. A quick note on the CSP, this is super important because obviously it's an audit requirement. It's a compliance requirement, and it's one of the biggest pain points which customers have highlighted to us. Swift publishes about 40 control objectives across 7 sections, and every Swift customer has to audit their environment at least on an yearly basis. So how does AWS ProServe help their customers migrate their Swift environment to AWS? AWS ProServe has invested time, effort, and a lot of design thinking to build this offering, which will help you, the customer, to migrate their Swift environment. This offering is a financial industry solution which will bring you prefabricated patterns to customers, to you, right? Think of it as a prefabricated, pre-plumbed architectural patterns which we will bring to your environment. As part of this offering, right, we will also integrate that solution with your DevSecOps pipeline. Now comes the critical part, right? How do we help with the audit process? In the offering, we have built a conformance pack, right, which will continuously monitor your Swift environment against the Swift control objectives. So at any point of time, you are fully aware of your compliance status, not just on an yearly basis, right? So, and this conformance pack will alert you as soon as it senses, any resource which is non-compliant, and then we have gap remediation to bring that resource back to a compliant status. Whether it can be automatically triggered or it can be manually triggered. That's on you. Further, you can download a compliance or a conformance report, which you can then pass it on to your auditor, right? So it will give you an objective number and the control which is mapped to that objective, and whether a particular resource is compliant or not compliant to your auditor. This will significantly reduce the friction point and the preparedness which every customer has to go through at least every year. Needless to say, the solution, the offering here is built on best practices, so it brings high availability and resiliency by default. And we will also integrate this solution with your on-prem AD or whichever third-party IDP solution you have for single sign-on. We'll integrate that with your co-located VPN and HSM devices. So you would be wondering, right? Okay, the offering looks great, but why should I care? Why should I engage with AWS ProServe? The reason you should care on using this AWS ProServe offering is that you will be able to accelerate your time to market. When I say accelerate your time to market, what does it mean to you? It will reduce your time and effort to migrate. The solution you will have will be the best of the breed because it is built using AWS best practices, right? You can be confident, right? And you will start using or benefiting from the AWS cloud platforms features. Second point, which I just reiterated, is that you will always know your Swift compliance status, right? You will not have any surprises when you start doing an yearly audit at, oh my God, I'm really out of whack here. I now have to remediate and all those things. You're always on the know. And I will show you in a second the dashboard, right, which will give you a kind of a single pane of glass to view all your compliance status at all time. One of the design elements for this offering was that we wanted to reduce the change management friction for this solution. So all the deployment of this solution is manifest file driven, config file driven, right? So you essentially change your settings on the manifest file, and it will essentially kick off a DevOps cycle in the background, right? So you don't really need to go and change the code of the offering. You just need to change the parameters, and it will change the settings. We will help you do performance testing, and obviously we have a resident architect model which we can use, or which you can use, to manage your ongoing conformance pack. So every year, Swift may or may not come out with new objectives, right? So this resident architect will help you keep compliant with the newer objectives at all time. This is a snapshot which I was just talking about. So as you can see on the right hand side of your screen, the compliant and the non-compliant statuses, and you can see the controls in the third column. That's the control number, which is mapping to the control objective of Swift. This is a reference architecture for the Swift offering. It's mostly EC2 and RDS driven because of the Swift requirements, but we can work on I would say modernizing it as and when Swift certifies the architecture. So there's a certification factor here. Obviously, we have trusted partners whom we use to scale. Now, the question is, how do you get started, right? This is all great, but what's the next step? The next step would be, contact us, the AWS. We have dedicated essays for your account. We have dedicated ProServe folks, ESMs, as we call them, to help you. And we will essentially gather with your technical teams, with your business teams, and do a deep dive or dive deep on your particular environment setup and plan out your migration steps. With that, thank you.